okay?
Yeah, we're not hearing anything from you.
Uh,
I don't think she's got a mic. Oh,
Yeah, that's what I'm interpreting it. No microphone.
Okay.
hey, I can read lips. All right, way to go, Kay.
She said sit on her thumb.
Be right back. I'm gonna go fill my teacup.
That's good to know.
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means, but good luck.
that was code for.
I think it means he's probably going to get up in the middle of the meeting and make another trip out the door.
That's what I was referring to.
As long as he doesn't tell us, it's okay.
Just saw one pop in and said K0T. I was ready to run that on QRZ to see who the hell it was.
What is that, Mike?
It's Chet with his abbreviated call.
That's an encoder for ICOM 760, what is that, 756, I think it is. Apparently the shaft froze up on it and I took it apart and got it working again. It's an optical encoder. Wasn't very hard to do, but apparently the grease in it turned to glue. It just locked up the knob.
That's on the VFO.
Yeah.
That's not supposed to happen.
30-year-old grease or 40-year-old grease?
Well, it's 30-year-old grease, at least.
Okay.
But we got her fixed. Took a small screwdriver and a bunch of alcohol and got her put back together with some polyurethane grease. So it works pretty good.
Hey, you guys are right. Charlie does have a vanity call.
Hey, K0T.
Well, I don't know why that happened. I don't know. I might not fix it.
It doesn't matter. We know who you are and we know where you live.
I probably ought to change it to Chet.
Oh, coot.
Old coot. I love it.
Well, we're up to 22 so far, guys. Good turnout so far.
Well, the band hasn't started yet. So.
I count 25, don't I?
It says 26 on my screen.
All right, I'm sorry, 26, but we lost Jim, our presenter.
No, he's there.
Oh, that's right. Or John, I'm sorry. Oh, man. See, working at home's killing me, guys.
That's his ugly brother, John.
It's Dave, Echo Mike 28. I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, you do.
Say,
All right. Well, I guess we go ahead, Charlie.
Can you do you get a list of the participants of the meeting or not?
No, I do not get a list of attendees, but I am recording this and I can copy it down and send it to you later, okay?
Okay, well, I'd appreciate it. I'm trying to do it here, but it's kind of hard.
Don't sweat it, boss. We got it. I've got to be in video or recorded here.
All right, just email me that whenever you get it. Thank you.
Not a problem. Okay, it's close enough. We've got a good turnout. So why don't we get this little circus going here? For those of you that saw the emails on the reflector about lunch Friday and wanted to know what the hell I'm talking about, our illustrious editor of the newsletter for over 40 years, we decided to acknowledge his work. So we gave him a plaque. And we also gave him this little big golly key. Let me see if I can share this here. Hang on. So let's see what I got here. See if this thing's going right.
It looks good.
We can, yeah, we can see it.
Right. All right, we'll do this. Okay, so this is the Bengali key that we had made special that Bruna has got. Now, she will take orders and they will make us copies with our calls. Hang on, let me pull up some more pictures. Wherever they went. I knew that was going to happen. Hang on, let me stop sharing for a second.
Congratulations, Mikey.
Okay, anyway, this is one view. And there's a top view of it, of course. And you can see Mike's call is on the side. Now, they've got it. She will sell it to us with our call signs on it. And the approximate price is $253 total. They will put the call and the club logo on it for no charge. So if we want to get that taken care of, we can do that. But we need to get a head count, and she's only got 2 of them available now, and they're gone. Rick and Lee are nabbing them up. 3, they've got 1 available. So either you can contact me via email. I'm sorry, what was that, Rick? We don't have any at all? All of them are gone. Okay, so I'll have to get a hold of Bruna, and she mentioned that if we get some kind of head count, they can get more stock in. Hopefully, I'll talk to her and see what I can find out. We'll get it to where they can be delivered at Dayton to us somehow or another for those that are going to Dayton. But if you're interested, I will give you an email, or you can contact me through the Reflector, and we'll get a list going and contact Bruna and get everything all worked out. So next, let's go through this presentation real quick, and then we'll turn it over to John. And we're going to welcome to the club. Of course, we've had a great turnout. I appreciate everybody coming by. The state of the club, there's a lot of changes going on. We've got the DXpedition committee is together. It is Rob, KE5BR, Drew, K3AP or K3PA, and Ed, AI60, and they're going to be determining how much we should give to the major DXpeditions. Now, what we need to do in March, I don't want to do it this month, but in March, we need to figure out a cost, like I said on the Reflector, figure out what our yearly maximum is going to be and how much we want to allot maximum possible to each DXpedition. So we can figure that out and get that thing going. The award and contesting committee is together. They've been very active. Real quick, AB0X, do you want to make any comment, or should we hold off until you guys get something in stone? Where'd Mike go? Mike, you're muted.
He's talking, but he's muted.
He's on his new key.
Yeah. Okay. You hear me now?
Yeah, got you, Mike.
The space bar is not working tonight. Yes, we'll wait and send out something on this. Ron printed it out last Friday, and it's just about complete. We're going to have a list of awards that the club members can actually vote for, and we'll pick the ones that there's most support for. We're also going to offer a yearly DXCC award or certificate for every club member that works in 100 countries, whether they participate in W0AR or not. So that's a neat new thing. And Jerry and Ron and I are working hard to try and satisfy the needs and desires of our club. We'll make a presentation on that in a few days. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. You guys are doing great work, and that's what we need to get going here. So, Okay, the expedition timelines for March. Let's go to the next page here. This is from Call at DX World. This 8 Queen 7 is active. They have been worked on 160 by some East Coasters and some up north. And I guess after that, they're going to C56. I have not heard the Julia 88 and the PJ2 I've heard a couple of times. We've got Fox Oceans coming up, 8 Queen 7 again for the ARRI. Knows looks like there's possibly 4 or 5 D expeditions going to be available during the ARRL contest. Fox 6, Fox Golf, and PJ7. PJ7's been active off and on, and then a 5 X-ray again. So now these slides in this PowerPoint that I'm showing you guys right now are up on the groups IO in the files section, and we're going to start putting the newsletters up there too. Okay, here's some PJ2 by DK0 or DK90N. I'll have this up there. I'll try to keep this updated. It's got some QSL routes on it. A lot of them, as you can see, are going by LOTW, which is awesome. 9 November 7 that we worked is going through LOTW. Robert gets it up there in about 24 hours if you work him. So, and for WPX sideband, the end of March, we've got 7 Queen 6 is back, 8 Queen 7, Fox Golf 4, Juliet 68. Juliet 68 started to get stoked up again. He started to be more active on, they've got a skimmer on down there, and they're gonna be more active on Twitter and everything else. PJ7, of course, PJ7 PL is another one. And then the ZF1s. And I think W0MB worked them during the 160 phone. Did you, Mike?
No, I run QRP.
All right, but you did hear them, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. With that, upcoming contest. Got the 160 contest coming up was last weekend. The logs are due by March 4th, guys. Don't sleep on this one. NAQPD Gritty was last weekend, March 6th on those logs. The ARRL International DX Contest sidebands going to be the 5th and the 6th. So that's Friday night, 6 o'clock our time to 6 o'clock Sunday. Craig will get together. I'll get you set up if you want to play in that. Just not if you understand. No need to say anything. Logs are due on the 13th, and the WPX sidebands the end of the month, March 26th to the Friday, and let's see, 27th, 20 be the 28th will be the ending time on that. The logs are due on the 1st on that. Of course, for the smaller contest, check the WA7 BNM calendar. That's pretty much what I've got for the slides. And like I said, they're up on the webpage if you guys want to download those and take a look. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. John, K6 Mike, who's going to tell us all about Namasa. Go ahead, John.
Okay, can you see that? It's
Yes.
A little small.
It's a little small. Hey, well, before we start, let me first thank you for inviting me to come back for a third chat with you guys. I had a great time last time. We talked about Wake Island and Baker, and this time we're gonna go head to the Caribbean. But just before we do that, I want to model my fantastic Kansas QSO Party T-shirt that I just got from W0 Bravo Hotel over the weekend. It's one of my favorite contests, and I guess I qualified for this T-shirt by spelling Kansas Sunflower QSO Party and Yellow Brick Road, but also working a bunch of the 1x1 stations. And I'm sure several of you guys were involved in that QSO Party on the road or at home. So a big thank you for doing that. I love, you're one of my favorite QSO parties. I always enjoy sitting in the chair over the weekend. You keep me going, especially with all of the online, all the 1x1 calls and all the guys who've gone mobile. So I'm a happy camper today wearing this t-shirt. All right, we're going to head down to the Caribbean today. And just a little bit background, which you've heard before, just run through this quickly. I'm from upstate New York, originally was born in Buffalo, raised in Syracuse, got my license back in '58, moved out here for a job opportunity. Basically, we stayed out here after that, dropped out of the hobby for a few years like you do when you're raising a family and getting your work life together, upgraded to my current call sign during that time and got back in, back around 2000, more or less on a full-time basis. But I kind of split my time chasing the rare DX just like you guys do. I just listen with interest as you post all the DX expeditions that are coming up, as they're rare these days. And I love contesting, and I certainly enjoy and have been lucky enough to participate in some of the expeditions. To give back to the hobby, I've held some leadership positions. I can show you those there. I've been involved with the California QSO party for 10 years. So I know what it takes to put one of these on. And that's why I was smiling when I got my t-shirt in the mail over the weekend. One of the most, one of my favorite organizations I actually helped start back in 2009 is CW Ops. I'm ID number 11. And right now there's over 3,000 members. That's turned out to be one of the strongest organizations to help keep the art form of CW alive. Really enjoyed seeing the progress there, especially with CW Academy. Yeah, that's my novice rig there, my SX99 and Heathkit DX40. And with that and a long wire, you could work the world back in the late 50s, in the good old days. But we're here to talk about the expeditions. And I wasn't sure exactly who's going to be on the call, so I put together this definition. It's pretty simple. The expedition is a long distance trip organized by ham radio operators to an exotic location. The location is typically an island or a country, or it could be a specific geographical grid. It's exotic because there aren't too many ham radio operators that are active, and it's also sometimes it's in a remote location. And we do this for the challenge of operating in a rare place, often in an inhospitable place. And we really love to get your call sign in the log so you can get credit for that rare contact for your personal award objectives and so forth. And when we do it, if it's done right, it's a lot of fun. And from what I can tell, and I've mentioned this before, the first organized expedition was in 1947, and that was Thor Heyerdahl's trip from South America to the Pacific. He wanted to prove that it was possible for people from Peru to travel across over to help settle the Polynesian islands. And that was the call sign he used, and that's his QSL card, LI2B. Well, in case you're having trouble throwing a dart at the calendar, or at the map rather, and remembering where Navassa is, it's right here. Well, see, that dog actually knew the answer, and that's what I just heard. So to have an intelligent dog on, that's really great. Perfect timing. So there it is. There's Navassa. It sits about 100 miles south of Guantanamo Bay. It's about 90 miles east of Jamaica and 35 miles west of Haiti. And just a little bit about the topography. It's a very interesting island. It's pear-shaped, as you can see, pretty flat. And the aerial view looks like the saddle of my Harley Davidson motorcycle. There's not much there. There's a lighthouse. You'll get to see that close up in a bit. And there's only one accessible place to reach this island from the sea, and it's called Lulu Bay. It was named after Christopher Columbus because apparently Nava means a plateau, and so it wound up as Navassa in 1504. Nobody lives there. It's in unincorporated U.S. territory. It's about the size of Central Park. And as I mentioned, there's an abandoned lighthouse, and primary access is via Lulu Bay. A little bit about the history. This is where I give you the straight poop, so to speak. This is 2 square miles of petrified bird excrement, better known as guano. And guano phosphate's a superior fertilizer. It's also a source of saltpeter for gunpowder. And this crazy act back in 1856 that was passed when the U.S. enabled anybody in the United States to take possession of an island that contained guano deposits as long as it wasn't occupied or within the jurisdiction of any other government, which is exactly what Peter Duncan did in 1857. He claimed Navassa for the U.S. and for 40 years or so, the Navassa Phosphate Company of Baltimore strip mined and exported over 1 million tons of phosphate from Navassa. This mining was done by Maryland prisoners and freed black slaves after the Civil War. They used mining picks and dynamite and human-powered rail cars. It wasn't pleasant work at all. The climate is sweltering, and they weren't paid very much, and there was just a lot of abuse. So there was a revolt in 1889, and during that revolt, 3 supervisors were killed, 14 miners were put on trial, they were convicted in Boston, but President Harrison sent an envoy to investigate this thing and eventually commuted 3 death sentences. Shortly after that, all guano mining ceased on Navassa. Now, what's interesting about this country or entity is that it's also claimed by a lot of other countries, including Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, Mexico, and so forth. It's everyone seems to want to lay claim to Navassa for various reasons, but today, U.S. has full legal control. That includes economic, navigational, and of course, the refuge management. Everything is overseen by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services and the Department of the Interior. When the Panama Canal opened in 1914, the amount of shipping to the eastern seaboard through the Windward Passage increased dramatically. That's between Cuba and Haiti there. And so the U.S. Coast Guard erected a 162-foot tall lighthouse to help these ships navigate through. That ran for 80 years under the Coast Guard. During the World War II, Navassa was an observation post for a while. But in 1996, the lighthouse was shut down because by then ships were navigating by satellite and computer. And today, and from then until today, it remains under the Department of the Interior. And it's actually a closed national wildlife refuge, which means you need to get permission from Fish and Wildlife to go there. And the ecosystems around there survived virtually untouched because this place has never been inhabited. A couple of photos. This is some older photos of the lighthouse. You can get a sense of that, and it sits 300 feet above sea level. And sorry. See, I don't know what happened there. I think. Let's go back here. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So flashing back to 2015, and Navassa was ranked at number 2 out of the most wanted list. And the reason for that was that the previous expedition was 22 years before that, 1993. So it had been a long time since anybody had gotten permission to go there. And to get permission, you have to get past no. Typically, you get these objections. It's difficult to get there because it's too physically remote, or it could be too politically remote, or once you get there, it's a wildlife refuge. And so it's hard to get permission to go to a place where there's, a lot of birds or fish or other wildlife. Sometimes you'll hear that it's going to be just too expensive, and that's a barrier, especially if you're heading to the South Atlantic, where you might need an icebreaker or helicopter or both. Often when you get there, you just may not land. That certainly happened to some friends of mine a couple of years ago, tried to get to Bouvet. They sailed from South America, spent 2 weeks on a boat, got to Bouvet, and Mother Nature said, not today. You have to leave because you're not going to be able to land. They couldn't get off. They couldn't fly the helicopters off the boat. They had to sail home by way of South Africa. So they spent a month on this boat after planning this trip for about 1.5 years, only to have Mother Nature kind of get in their way of success. Hopefully the next group going out later this year we'll have better luck. And then another problem is whoever needs to approve your application isn't always available to go over that, or isn't available to travel with you, because almost always to go to one of these U.S. Fish and Wildlife sanctioned locations, you have to take a biologist with you. Well, what about Navassa? How did we get permission to go there? I'll introduce you to the heroes of the story. You probably know Bob Alphin, K4UE, Glenn Johnson, W0GTA, and Mike, NA5U. These guys formed what was called the KP1, KP5 project back in 2002. And their goal, pure and simple, was to get permission from Fish and Wildlife to visit 2 islands in the Caribbean, Desecheo and Navassa. They were successful in getting permission to go to Desecheo, but it took 7 years. Finally got permission in 2009, and they ran a successful operation. The call sign was K5D. I'm sure you guys worked them when they were there in a successful the expedition. And so they were feeling really positive and optimistic about getting permission to go to Navassa shortly thereafter. That didn't work out so well. They still had to wait 5 more years before they got permission to go to Navassa. It required a couple of congressional hearings, a whole lot of emails, phone calls, and paperwork, but they finally did. So altogether, it took them from 2002 to 2014, basically, to get permission to go to Navassa, 12 years. Just as a reference point, our first trip to the moon only took 8 years. So we finally got permission, though, from Fish and Wildlife on May 8th, 2014. That was a great day. Permit was valid for the time period that you see here. They said you can stay for 14 days. Don't interfere with the birds nesting on Navassa. Try to make no environmental impact. Don't embarrass yourself by bringing any souvenirs home. No weapons, drugs, alcohol, fires, or gambling will be allowed. You can bring 15 people, but you got to bring everything. And by everything, they meant everything, because there's really nothing there. So to provide all the camp infrastructure and all supplies. And they required us to have both a standby helicopter and an offshore ship. We couldn't get permission to go. And then just to make sure that we were protected, quote unquote, and help provide extra leadership and compliance, they wanted us to take along 4 Fish and Wildlife personnel, and at no cost to the taxpayer, meaning their transportation and meals had to be covered. They said, you want to do this? Please send us $104,000 in advance. And we did. Keep that in mind as you're talking about the donations that you want to give to the expeditions. I heard that on your agenda tonight. So once we got permission to go, this team came together, 15 operators. We had been on different trips together in different combinations, so we knew each other. The team leaders for this trip were both Bob Alphin, K4UE, and Glenn Johnson, W0GTA. So we built up a high level of trust. We knew how to operate well together. We spoke 3 languages, CW, sideband, and digital. And each one of the members of the team brought some extra special skill. As always is the case, somebody really, someone likes to take charge of the antennas. Others are very good at infrastructure and logistics and fundraising. And so that works out really well. But there are always 2 requirements that I mentioned that you have to have on a trip like this. One is make sure that you leave your ego in the parking lot. There's no I in the team, and you have to bring your sense of humor along for sure on a trip like this. Step 3 was now figuring out how to get there safely. The keyword safely. These are some photos of Navassa. There are no beaches. You just don't drive up and jump off and hop on a sandy beach. There are no sandy beaches. It's all about sheer, unfriendly cliffs that you see. And you can see that in the lower right photo, the gentleman standing at the top of the cliff there. So you might step back and say, what is Navassa telling you? Well, basically, Navassa is saying, don't come here, stay away. The grassland there, it looks pretty, but it's covered with a lot of potholes. There's sharp coral rocks and limestone. It's amazingly hot there. We didn't realize it was going to be hot, but it is. But the big problem is there are no water resources, no infrastructure. You've got to bring everything. There's some poisonous plants and trees and some unfriendly critters. And it's a national wildlife refuge. So there's a lot to think about. Now you might ask the question, well, how did the previous expeditions get there? Well, this is kind of how they did. They came into Lulu Bay. They climbed up and dropped a rope ladder down, and then they hoisted up some boat anchors on their shoulders and got to the top and camped out there, or maybe a little bit above that, where that photo is, operated for a period of time, and then reversed the process. That's how it was done in the past. Well, with our hardy group of operators in their mid-60s, we were not about ready to do that. And in fact, we weren't really allowed to do that if you read the 20-page guidelines from Fish and Wildlife. So they said, you need to have both a standby helicopter and an offshore ship. So we thought, well, we'll just go and we'll just reserve the shadow. There's the boat, there's the helicopter. We'll just lock into them for a couple of weeks until we found out that the cost was a little bit on the high side. So we thought we've got to go to plan B. Well, the first thing we did was do a pretty good job of looking at the terrain around there from the benefit of some photographs from the Coast Guard and Fish and Wildlife. And this is what it looks like, quote unquote, close up. What you can see is the lighthouse. Next to it is the lightkeeper's house. It has no roof on it, long gone because of the harsh weather down there, and never bothered to replace it. And then that trench that you see is the phosphate mining trench that is still there today. And so we noticed that there's what looks like a small area that would be a good flat area for a helicopter to land. So we made that assumption, and we took a look now at the map and said, okay, if we're going to try to get there on a helicopter, from where? Well, we can't come from Dominican Republic. It's just too far away. We're not going to get there from Haiti. First of all, Haiti thinks they own Anavas Island, and they actually don't have any helicopter service. Guantanamo was off because it's a restricted base. So the most logical jumping point was Jamaica. And that's the good news. The bad news is it's 100 miles to Navassa. So first thing we had to do, or the team had to do, and that's Bob, we give Bob Alfin a lot of credit for this. He spent time researching the most reputable helicopter service in the Caribbean and found it to be this company Helidosa, which is actually based in the Dominican Republic. And they provide cargo service, air ambulance service all over the Caribbean and Latin America. They had a great safety record. And they said, sure, we'd be happy to join your team and transport you to Navassa from Ocho Rios on the north shore of Jamaica. But if you take a look at this challenge, their top speed's 100 miles per hour. It's 100 miles one way, which means it's a 2.5-hour round trip which includes refueling. And because of that, they needed to put on an extra tank, which then restricted the amount of cargo that we could take over on any one trip. And they were only going to be able to fly during daylight hours. So obviously multiple trips were going to be needed, but they said, Helidosa said, if you want us to join you, our team would be happy to do that. Please send us a couple $100,000 to book us in advance, and we'll be happy to join you. So we said, okay, and we did. Now, step 4 was one of the most important logistics challenges, which is gathering all the equipment that we needed and getting it over there ahead of time. So that meant, first of all, the equipment that we were going to use, all the radios and amplifiers had to be tested. But also we had to bring in folding tables and chairs. We had to bring in food. We had to bring in water, just a whole lot of stuff because there's literally nothing on Navassa. So, you know, when you start putting a list together, there's everything you can think of that you needs to be on the list. You need to pre-test everything as well, as far as all the equipment that we're going to use, make sure that you got all your cables right, you know how to put the antennas together. You don't want to waste time trying to figure that out when the clock's ticking. We packed everything in a 20-foot container and then sent it to Ocho Rios, Jamaica, and to be held at the customs for our arrival. Well, that was part 1. We figured we knew what we were doing as far as the helicopter and starting the supplies, but the other requirement was a boat. And we got really lucky here. You may have heard of this DXpeditioner, George Wallner, Alpha 7 Japan Victor. He's lives in Miami Beach, and he's a veteran of many DXpeditions. Fortunately, he owns a beautiful boat here. It's a really nice yacht called the Electra. And he said, I'm available, be happy to help. If you want, you can send a couple ops down to Miami Beach, and I'll put them on board along with some supplies that you might need. I'll come down to Lulu Bay and I'll sit there for 2 weeks and can help you resupply whatever you need, help in case there's an emergency. And I will construct a catenary line in a davit. And we said, that's great. What the hell is a catenary line in davit? Well, some of us really never heard of that before. He said, well, it's very simple. It's used commonly out in the wild. I'm going to install a couple of aluminum tubes in the concrete up above on that platform and drop a catenary line down to a mooring ball, which will be anchored to the ocean floor. And then along the catenary line, I'll put in a load line, and it'll have a pulley and a hook on it. And we'll just come up to that with our skiff, load whatever you need on it, and you guys can just hoist up whatever it is. And that's how you'll get some stuff for there. And we said, okay, fantastic. And he said, I'll also put a rope ladder in because there's nothing there now, but we'll put a rope ladder up just in case of an emergency. So George was on the team. Just to give you an idea of kind of the dollars, how they're shaping up, right about now, we knew we were going to need about $350,000 to $400,000 for this trip. And the resources will only come in from clubs like Kansas City, a lot of clubs that like to support the expeditions. There are some corporate sponsors, of course, who either donate or loan us equipment. There are those, all of the operators, of course, pitch in, and then there are a number of individuals who donate to the expeditions directly online. And that's where those four sources are typical of all the expeditions how they're funded. All right, after all this planning and so forth, it was time to start this DXpedition. But first we had to all get our immunizations. We had 4: hepatitis, malaria, tetanus, and typhoid. And also on a trip like this, you have to have medical evacuation insurance. Everybody has their own personal medical evacuation insurance. You need it because in case something happens, somebody needs to come and pick you up and take you home. And so that's just a requirement. And we were limited, our personal belongings were limited to 40 pounds because of the weight limitations on the helicopter. But that's okay. We got ourselves packed, and then the team departed from all over the US, and one guy came in from Hungary. And we landed in Montego Bay, Jamaica. I don't know if you've been to Jamaica. We didn't have time to really enjoy the fun part of Jamaica, or at least I didn't on this trip. So, but we got through customs without any problems. And then we spent 2 hours on a bus traveling along the north shore of Jamaica from Montego Bay to a place called Ocho Rios, which sits right on the north shore of Jamaica. And we checked into a place called the Moxon Beach Club, which was a modest little hotel. We'll call it a 1-star hotel, but we didn't really care because we weren't going to be there very long, but it met our needs. The second night we were there, we had dinner with the Jamaican Amateur Radio Association, JARA, and they provided some useful tips and guidance about Navassa because some of them had been there over the years. They traveled around that area. And they also said, if you have a problem, we'll just serve as a backup emergency communications network for you. So we were really happy to meet these guys. And at that same dinner, we met our pilot, co-pilot, and mechanic, Danilo Nelson and Juan Carlos from Gila Dosa. All of these guys are graduates of the equivalent of the Air Force Academy in the Dominican Republic. Very capable people, professionals, and safety, of course, was number 1, number 2, and number 3 with these guys. So we really enjoyed. They became a strong part of our team, and we were lucky that we really had them. The next morning, we met for the first time as a team to talk about our goals, and number 1 on the list was don't screw up. You've been given a rare opportunity to visit this refuge, so make sure we understand the rules. Let's obey them. So we went through all of that. Then we talked about our goals as far as contacts. We figured if you know, we all stayed healthy and we didn't have any technical problems and Murphy didn't visit us too often, we should be able to make 100,000 contacts. We wanted to maximize the number of new call signs. It's unique call signs. People had never worked Navasa before. Of course, follow our propagation and pilot advice, the pilots that were offshore communicating with us, and especially try to focus on Asia and Europe, operate all 3 modes and all bands, and try to have a safe and fun trip. So the next morning, we went out to the airport at Ocho Rios. It's called Ian Fleming International Airport. And the purpose of going there was, of course, to make sure that all of the cargo that we had sent over from the US arrived safely. And then we had to meet with customs. Ian Fleming is a sleepy little airport. It's just a commuter airport for mostly flights around Jamaica. And yes, it's named after the man himself. Ian Fleming was a naval intelligence officer, and he actually spent quite a bit of time in the Caribbean, and especially in Jamaica. He fell in love with it and bought property there and eventually settled there. And yes, he wrote all of the James Bond's novels there. He was a heavy smoker. Unfortunately, he died early in the game. He was born in 1908, died in 1964. There are several Ian Fleming landmarks around there, different restaurants named him, the different dishes named after him, actually, in some of the restaurants. All right, step one, when we got there, was to open up the container, make sure it all got there safely, unpack it, and then have the customs folks look it over, say, okay, check our manifest. They opened everything, they double checked, and they said, you're good to go, no problem. They didn't quite understand all of this because we're bringing this stuff in, but then we're going to fly it out to basically another DXAC entity, Navasa. So it was a little confusing, but you know, they understood, and we met all of their requirements. The most important tool we brought with us was a digital scale, because everything had to be weighed. So we had this digital scale, and we had to limit our trip to 1,200 pounds per trip. So there wasn't much room for error in each of the loads. So the first thing we actually did before we were ready to go was to put together our first 5 loads for the helicopter. So each of those photos that you see, give or take, is 1,200 pounds, also factoring in which of the operators are going to sit on the helicopter along with their personal equipment. So we had a couple Excel spreadsheet experts with their laptops, tracking all of this very carefully. And we were ready to go, except we still needed to get some gasoline. So we went out to the local hardware store, bought 35-gallon cans, and then drove over to one of the stations there locally. And it was amazing as we drove up and said, please fill these up. It's one of those situations where you just sort of had to be there as we saw the owner's face pulling in with 30 gas cans. But now we really were ready to go. We're ready for the pilot. So there's a group photo at the helicopter. Here was the game plan. It's kind of 3 parts to it. The first thing that had to happen is that from Guantanamo Bay, the 4 Fish and Wildlife guys who basically live in Puerto Rico, but they departed from Guantanamo, there they are flying from their helicopter to Navasa on the morning of 31 January. And their purpose there was to make sure everything was safe. They were going to call us then by sat phone and say, okay, it's time for you guys to start bringing your equipment and operators over. And at the same time, and the third part of this plan was George left from Miami with a couple operators and traveled down through the Bahamas, down to Lulu Bay to be our backup per the plan. So that was the game plan. On 31 January, and we were supposed to get a call early in the morning, but because of some problems with Guantanamo Bay and some visiting dignitaries, airspace was closed for most of the morning. But at 2 o'clock that day, Bob finally got a call saying, okay, green light, you guys can take off. So the first 3 people to go were Glenn Johnson, one of the original members of the KP15 team who got permission to go from Desecheo, and Jerry WB9Z and George and 4GRN. You can see them, really happy guys. They're sitting in the helicopter. And away they went. This is the first trip over. And that was a pretty exciting day. Going out, this is really underway. Up and away.
Up and away is right.
So later, after the trip, we got this photograph that somebody took from Glenn as he jumped off the helicopter. He was so excited at being there that he planted the American flag immediately. And then he's quoted as saying, "One small step for man, one giant step for DXing." You can imagine after all that planning and the anticipation, what a great feeling it was to actually be there. Well, the next day I went over. This is a shot behind the pilot, behind the co-pilot, actually, as I'm zooming in. And it's pretty exciting to finally see the destination right through the windshield. You can see what Nevasa looks like from this distance. We were very lucky on this trip. We had great weather both ways. We didn't have any technical problems. And I just can't praise the Helidosa guys enough for the work that they did. This is what it looks like, kind of just a snapshot. Now, what was really good is that as I looked out the window on the left side, I'm coming in, as we came in for landing just before I could see the Electra. There's the Electra anchored at Lulu Bay, and you can see in the lower left corner, lower left photo rather, you can see the Electra. But then if you scan up the hill, you can see that slope up to the lighthouse is like 35 degrees or whatever. So it's quite a climb up there. But we were really excited to see the Electra sitting in place. Now, just before we came in for landing, this is another close-up shot and give you a really good view of what's there. There's the lighthouse on the left. There's the lightkeeper's house, again, with no roof. And then there's a little concrete hut that served as a storage unit, a storage hut for acetylene torches and dynamite and so forth that were used by the miners. And you can actually see this is where the helicopter landed, and then that guano mining trench is still there. We'll take a walk down through that trench in a little bit. So the helo lands at the lighthouse. This is what it looks like. Open up, and the key to making this all work is to make sure that as soon as the helo landed, that particular on that run, that we knew who was supposed to go out there, unload it, and where everything was supposed to go. That was all planned ahead of time, so that we would, as efficiently as we could, unload these helicopters and get things set up. As soon as we unloaded everything, and very soon after we got there, we met with the 4 people who had come out to help us. These are 4 members of U.S. Fish and Wildlife: Raul, Mike, Billy, and Bryant. They all got nicknames eventually as Shock, Awe, and All Hell No. These are really well-prepared, well-informed Fish and Wildlife personnel, and they came well-armed as well. Part of the reason for that is the Nevasa is not policed on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, there's a lot of drug trafficking around the Caribbean, and different things can happen at different times. They wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be bothered. Yeah, so they were there for that reason, among other things. They had a great work ethic, great sense of humor. It was really fun to work with them. The first thing we asked them, and we thought we were going to get a big no, is, gee, can we use the lighthouse for anything? And they said, well, sure, you can use the lighthouse if you want, but first, you got to clean it out. So we said, well, okay, we'll do that. They said, yeah, those stairs are pretty rusty, but they're stable enough. You don't need to climb up there much. That'll be great if you can kind of stay down in the lobby area, because that's really where the useful space is. But we did that. So we were happy to be able to use the lighthouse. First step was to clean it out. And then our antenna guys went to work. One of the guys on the team was W2GD, John, who's a great CW operator, but he's also an antenna genius and does a lot of tower climbing, and he just was he was like a hog in heaven, man. He just started, along with several other guys, dropping wires everywhere. we had some great wire antennas because of this lighthouse on these different bands. In fact, our low band antennas were probably better than 99% of the people that we worked. We almost didn't need anything else. We could have run the whole DXpedition just using those wire antennas. But we wanted to have some directivity and some gain. We didn't have to bring all the other verticals that we thought we were going to, but we did bring 4 stepper antennas, the 2-element, and we also brought out a 6-meter Yagi. So some photos, there's 2 of the steppers. They're facing west and 1 6-meter Yagi. And then we had 2 other steppers facing east. And of course, you could change the direction on these. They all had a pointer. And of course, you just go out there and lift up the weight and swing that around whichever direction you want it to go to. But you'll notice also the pink flags. All of the Aggies have pink flags. That's a requirement from Fish and Wildlife. That's to discourage all the birds, if there are any birds floating around, from flying and hurting themselves. Well, K1N, that's the call sign we had. Base camp is starting to come together. We had the use of the lighthouse, and that was where we set up our CW stations. We had use of the little concrete hut. We set up 4 more stations over there. So the only shelter we needed to bring in, the extra shelter, was the meet, eat, and greet tent. That's where we met, ate, and planned. And we set up right next to the lighthouse. Some more photos to show you what that lease looked like. On the lower left is the lobby of the lighthouse, and that conveniently held 3 of the folding tables, so we could put in 3 CW stations there. And now to the right is that little concrete hut. We were able to get 4 folding tables in there, so we had 4 stations up and running, and those were used for either sideband or RTTY operation. Yes, a couple of us, all of us eventually went up to the top of the lighthouse for a view. We didn't stay up there very often. We did plant the flag, but we got a good view. And the last major decision was what to do about our sleeping arrangements. And originally our plan was to bring more shelters over because we didn't think we could use the lightkeeper's house at all. When we looked down there from the top of the lighthouse, you could see, and we thought, gee, that would actually be perfect if we could get permission. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife said, sure, you can use it, but first you got to clean it out. And we said, okay, we'll be happy to do that. So we got in there, cleaned it out, and so we converted it into the Navassa Hilton. This is where we slept. And here's a good photo that illustrates what we did. Where it says F&W, this is where some of the Fish and Wildlife guys were. Some of them had their tents inside. One guy had a hammock there in the center of the photo. But we were able to squeeze in 2 shelters at right angles to one another. I labeled them Suite 1 and Suite 2. So if you take a look at Suite 1, it looks like this. We were able to get 7 cots in there. And if you walk all the way down to the end of that hall and turn right, you'll see Suite number 2 and 7 more cots. So we had great shelter. Just a comment about the sleeping operators. When a DXpedition starts, you're doing one of several things. You're either on the air, or you're eating, or you're sleeping, or fixing something. And but sleeping is important. And so if you got off a shift at 9 in the morning and you want to go take a nap, you're going to be sleeping. So as you walk around these suites 1 and 2 throughout the day, throughout the week, you're always going to find some people taking a nap to catch up. And that's just the nature of a DXpedition. But finally, the DXpedition headquarters started coming together. This photo shows all the antennas basically that we have: Stepper 1, 2, 3, and 4, the 6-meter Yagi, the Navassa Hilton, and our operating environment. Now you might be wondering about the Navassa Power and Light. And well, if you walk around behind the lighthouse, you'll see the secret to our power success is these Honda generators, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. This is the sound that we heard 24 hours a day. This was music to our ears, of course. Inside, we had Elecraft K3 and KPA 500 combinations, the Grace combination for DXpeditions. The ergonomics are great. They don't weigh that much. You can run a KPA 500 on 110 volts. We had laptops, of course, and then wireless keyboards and mice, and everyone, brought some form of light. You need to be able to see what you're doing. We had 3-hour shifts. We operated 12 out of every 24 hours. One of the guys on the trip, K0IR, brought a color printer with him, and he printed out our operator schedules, and they were very, very complete and really fantastic. That helped streamline things, because when it was your turn to operate, you knew exactly which time, what station, what band, what mode, what power, and where in the world you were going to focus. And that was a luxury we don't always have, but that was part of the planning process that made this go very smoothly and helped boost our QSO count. The antenna patch panel is very sophisticated. There was 2 pieces of plexiglass with pass-through connectors on the back side, or all the coax cables from the antennas that came in, and on the front side were all the coax cables running out to the stations. And there in the lobby of the lighthouse, they were all sitting there on the table where all of the stepper controllers as well, so that when it was your turn to operate, you knew which band you would actually pick the band you want to operate, pick up your filter, and go to town. So here's a group, everyone on the air working, pileups on their shift, making lots of DXers happy. These guys were really devoted, and they're really excellent operators and great friends as well. You probably recognize a lot of these call signs. The two MDs we had on were K0IR and W0GJ. W0GJ is an orthopedic surgeon. K0IR is a retired radiologist. They both have been on many DXpeditions together. We use N1MM. I think I might have mentioned this to you before. N1MM Plus. Goal is, of course, to get your call sign in the log, and managing the pileups is important. It helps to have some contesting experience. In the US, all call signs start with Alpha, Kilo, November, and Whiskey. When you put your headphones on, you enter the prefix Twilight Zone. So before you go on a DXpedition, it's good to have some contesting experience to manage pileups. Good contest operators make good DXpedition operators. Some of the guys went out and worked the birds. They made about 30 satellite QSOs. I think we made 232 contacts on 6 meters. We had one radio devoted to the Magic Band, mostly South America, some North American stations in the Southeast. That was pretty successful. One of the things that surprised us, though, it was very hot there. If you've been to the Caribbean, it's usually a place to go, a nice place to go. Balmy breezes and good vacation spots and all, but for some reason, Navassa doesn't get those breezes the way we thought, and it averaged over 110 degrees most of the time we were there. You can see the reading. So one thing we were worried about is that we started drinking water a little bit faster than we thought. Needed to get some extra supplies. It takes a toll on you, if you're not prepared for it. Well, we're going to go down to Lulu Bay. So over my shoulders, you can see the lighthouse. And we're going to walk through the jungle. We're actually going to follow the mining rail car rail that you see there through the woods, through the forest, and hack your way through it, because this is just what it looks like. You have to be careful where you're stepping, what you're doing, but eventually this thing comes out into a clearing, and it slopes down at this angle, severe angle, and you'll come out, and this is what you'll see. This is Lulu Bay. This is kind of my first view of it. Sitting out there further out was the Electra, but every day we saw Haitian fishermen, and Haitian fishermen come over because it's great fishing, especially for red snapper. And that's what they do. They fish to eat. And they were real curious about what we were doing, but one of the guys on Fish and Wildlife spoke French and was able to explain what our goals were, why we were there. And they became, friends in a lot of different ways. I'll explain that more later. But the day that I was there, George actually came over on his skiff and decided to negotiate the rope ladder that he put up. I call him Fearless George. He's pretty much Fearless George. So I'll give you an idea
At a time, it does.
how kind of dangerous it is there. He had a couple of close calls the day before, but he persists.
Makes it look easy, doesn't he? Makes it look easy.
That's Lou N2 Tango Uniform and I talking about how easy this looks. And him a little bit further up, you can see how steep the cliffs are and what you have to do to get there. Now, remember, he promised to build this catenary line in Davit, and darn it if he didn't do it. And this is what it looks like. A couple different photos from one other side of the island there. It's a photo from the boat or the skiff. If you come look at it coming down the slope from the lighthouse, which it slopes down this severe angle, this 45-degree angle, and just walk right down to the base there, you can see it. You can actually see that he set this up. He actually had a little winch there, electric, and then he powered with a generator. And we then brought stuff up. If we needed another generator or we needed water, the member of his boat crew came, and he would just simply hang whatever it is on the pulley, a hook on the hook, and we would pull it up. You can see the catenary line over his head that was anchored to the bottom of the ocean. And using this method, this is how he brought up a bunch of stuff, especially the water that we needed, but extra fuel and other equipment that was on the boat. That worked beautifully for us. As you walk around Navassa, you have to be really careful. It has this low grassland and shrubs are everywhere, but you can see, if you're not careful, you can step into one of these potholes of limestone and coral and twist your ankle pretty badly. We did know that there were some poison plants and trees, but Fish and Wildlife gave us some quick lessons about what to do and not to do. We watched them very carefully. There were some unfriendly friends there. We didn't have too many problems, although one guy did get a blister bite, but it healed up pretty quickly around camp. We saw a lot of the red-footed buoys. They didn't bother us. They were just curious about what we were doing, but we didn't have much interaction with them, which was good for everybody. We did bring a banner called the Red Buoy Inn and stuck that up in our meet, eat, and greet tent. And you can see that shelter there. There's Mike on the left and John checking some emails. We had an email connection through satellite phone so we could send text messages back to let people know how we were doing. And then Lou and I sitting there just talking about the expeditions. Just another view of our headquarters with the Navassa Hilton in the background there. K0IR is busy working out those operating schedules that I showed you using a color printer. And then in the back, you see Glenn Johnson just picking out his latest dinner. And so there's Craig, K9CT, Glenn, and myself just enjoying our MREs. We had lots of choices: beef taco filling, we had chicken pesto, pasta, we had a couple apple turnovers. Actually, they weren't that bad. But we did come up with some new definition for MRE. Meals ready to expel was one. meals resembling edibles, morale reducing elements, and my personal favorite, meals refusing to exit. Yes, they actually weren't that bad. You've heard about a new taco MRE, which we can't wait to try someday. We did have our own little kitchen. It was consisted of a propane heater for we can make coffee or tea. And we had a microwave oven. All three of these, the ice maker included, ran off one of the generators. The ice maker saved our butt because we could make 28 pounds of ice, and we really needed to fill our water bottles with ice and keep hydrated. There at the time, the 12-watt solar charger was unique, but that's very common today. But then there were people that bring a variety of things that we could use, that we thought we could use in this remote location. After the first week, people got comfortable and changed their dress code, and we got to know each other better as one of the big benefits of the expedition. And we even had a hot dinner from the Electra. George had his crew with him from Florida, and they made us a dinner, and he came up and brought it up that rope ladder and climbed all the way up and then to the lighthouse. So we had a nice hot meal from the Electra. This was my meal kit that I brought. It's a typical thing that you would bring for camping. It was very handy. If you wanted to wash your clothes, I brought a little collapsible heat kitchen sink that holds some water, and we'd throw in some camp suds, wash out our clothes and hang them out on the community clothesline. Nobody wanted to take a hot shower, but you could jump into this tent and give yourself a cold shower if you want. And then, of course, we had the throne room set up. I mean, here's an embarrassing shot, which we always love to take, of Bob, K4UE, on the throne, expressing himself. And you might wonder about all the refuge and the waste. Well, originally we thought that we were going to have to take everything back on the helicopter, but Fish and Wildlife came to the rescue. They said, look, there's a bottomless pit over here. We're going to put some tape around it so you don't fall in. So please don't fall in to the bottomless pit. But you can, if you want, dump all your waste down there. And we happily did that. Made a big difference. Navassa at night and Vasa during the day or at night is just really beautiful. It's just a gorgeous location, as harsh as it is. And of course, my favorite views were at night, because the only light that we had there was our own man-made light from the tent in the operating rooms. And so we had a variety of things that we strung up LED lamps, LED strips rather. We had headlamps. This Energizer folding lantern was popular. We had USB headlights or lights on the laptops and so forth. Really critical. You go on a trip like this, if you can't see the keyboard, you're in trouble. So you got to make sure. So this is all part of the plan to start with, but we didn't have any trouble. It was really good. Now, after we were there, just before the last 2 days, we decided that we wanted to set some time aside. We broadcasted over the internet by email to a number of outlets that we wanted to operate on these particular days and frequencies, and focus toward JA and Asia and Oceania on Friday the 13th on 15 phone, and then Saturday, the 2 that you see. The purpose for that was to just, by that point, a lot of people had worked us, but there are always folks that had a hard time getting through. We wanted to make sure that we got as many first timers in the log. So that was really, really good. And so now, as often happens, all this planning and preparation, and you get there and set up and operate, and the time just goes by very quickly. We got there on the first, we started operating on the first. Our last day was the 15th, and so we had to depart. But just before doing that, we do what we always do, is give thanks to the organizations that help us. Northern California DX Foundation gave us a grant. Alacraft supplied us with the equipment, and DEXA a grant. DX Engineering is wonderful for supporting the expeditions. I can't speak highly enough about Tim Duffy and his team. But as I mentioned to you before, I always flip the banner around, because you never know who you need to thank later on. So wanted to make sure we get your logo out there one more time. Big decision on leaving. We had to make sure that we left nothing behind. So of course, the easy thing to do is just take it all back. That requires, just packing everything up packing up the helicopter and make several trips over a few days. But we said, you know what? We've gotten to know these Haitian fishermen. Would you mind if we only took the valuables back? Would you care if we gave away everything else to them? And they said, we only want you to make sure that you don't leave anything behind. We don't care. And they said, do what you need to do. Well, so for one day, it was an amazing time because they helped, the Fish and Wildlife helped organize trips from Lulu Bay up with these different fishermen and their different boats, crews. And we gave them everything. We gave them all the fuel. We gave them the cots, the tables, the shelters. We gave them clothing, some of our own shirts and hats, even our own sandals. These guys had nothing. And so it helped us and it really helped them. Here's one guy who got the step ladder and a folding table and some clothes. Carried them all the way down that same track path that I took you on all the way down to Lulu Bay to take home to Haiti in his little boat. And here are some of the photographs of them after they loaded some of the gasoline, which is like gold to them. And in return, what did they give us? Red snapper. They gave us red snapper because that's all they have to give. And that was just a really nice gesture on their part. They gave a bunch of fish to the guys on the Electra to cook, as well as to our team. Now it's time to leave. And one of the ops that flew into Miami was Tommy, HA7RY, great CW operator. And he had to get back on the boat. And this is the way he went back. And he hated this little chairlift. He thought he was going to fall off and be eaten by sharks. But of course, that didn't happen. So people were just watching him shake and quiver all the way down.
Hold it. It's funny.
I'll give you an idea of how that thing worked. It actually worked pretty well. Amazingly well for all the things that we needed to do. And now he's safely in the boat, breathing a sigh of relief. And then from there, you can see him getting out of the boat at the back of the Electra. The guy on the left with no shirt is Mike Mraz, N6MZ from Seattle. The guy in the white shirt, the t-shirt, is the owner. That's George. You can also get a sense of the size of this boat. It's really, the Electra is really a big yacht, and it's really beautiful. And so they're on their way back to Miami. And of course, just before they left, they had to break down the Davitt transport system. It's gone. Nothing got left behind, literally nothing on Navassa. So now it was time for us to leave. We had to do that in multiple trips, but just before leaving, Glenn Johnson volunteered to climb up to the top of the lighthouse and scratch our call signs on the wall above the window there. So I assume they're still there. And we left a US flag as well. So it was my turn to leave with Mike, and Billy and Brian gave us a full body, search, make sure we didn't have any souvenirs. And that was funny. But one thing that wasn't funny, it was really appreciated, is we got a passport stamp for Navassa Island. You can't not, that's hard to find. So it's one of our special memories. So here's a flight from the top, shooting this from the top of the lighthouse. One of the returning flights to Jamaica from the lighthouse. Gives you another view of the terrain. It's now swinging, heading west. So here's a shot of 4 of the guys going back. This is Jeff and John and Ralph and George. And everyone was really happy at this point, tired. And as we swung around just before landing, we swung by Moxon Beach Resort, the place we stayed at the very first day. And all of a sudden it started to look like a 5-star hotel. I wondered why that was. No, we were really happy to be back there. Yes, people were tired, that's for sure. So we'll take a moment to look at our report card and ask the simple question. How many of you guys worked us? Yes, raise your hand, raise it high. But I kind of know because I actually got your roster. I like to do this. I looked all your call signs up on Club Log to see who worked us. Now, I will apologize if your call sign's not there, but from what I can tell, we worked 45 members of the club. And if your roster is sitting around 90, that meant we worked half the club, which is pretty good. And it looks like we made it collectively 367 QSOs with you, an average of 8.2, which is pretty good. But of course, there's always some folks that like to sit in the chairs a little bit longer. AC0 to C, I think that's Jeff, K0VXU, Russ, and then yes, K7 for Sugar Victor. So congrats to Jeff, Russ, and Dave on a total. Looks like 61 QSOs. That's great. And please help me not only congratulate them, but welcome them into the DX Hogs of Fame. That's right. Just kidding. We're glad you had the stamina to sit in the chair that long. We made 140,000 QSOs. Again, it's our goal of 100,000. And that's largely due to the fact that we had the great antennas and we had no equipment failures, and the guys stayed healthy and we're excited working the pilot. So that was a great outcome. And you can see the breakdown. CW was 52%, phone 39%, and RIDI was 9%. Our multi-band was 20 meters, which is open almost always somewhere. And we made 5,441 contacts on one top band, which is really good. Now just concentrate on the RIDI percent. And this slide I put together, I may have shown you this, something like this before. This is our trip. 8.7% of our QSOs were digital. And if you notice, all of these DXpeditions until 2016, all the percent of digital contacts were all less than 10%. I was on the trip to Baker Island, and I think I mentioned this to you before. This is the first time we switched from RIDI to FT8 because the hourly rates were no comparison. You can make 80 to 90 QSOs an hour with RIDI, but 200 to 300 on FT8. So we replaced RIDI with FT8, and 24% of our contacts were FT8 contacts. But since then, I've tracked all of the DXpeditions since then. 36% of all the QSOs of these DXpeditions are FT8. So if you want a digital QSO, make sure you pay attention to what they're doing, which bands they're going to be on, and get WSJTX working on your computer. That's how DXpeditions are going to operate digitally. If they're not operating CW or sideband, they'll be on FT8. It doesn't make any sense to do it any other way. There's the breakdown by continent: 58% North America, no surprise, 32% Europe, and then 6% Asia. We're happy enough with those numbers. We worked 188 different countries on this trip. At the May 2015 DX dinner at Dayton, we were awarded the DXpedition of the Year. You can see the guys showing up in their good attire. We were featured on the cover of QST, October 2015, and to our greatest surprise, they actually put us on the cover of the 2016 calendar. So got to brag that I was on the calendar. That was really great. When we left, it was ranked 2 in terms of the most wanted. Right now, it's down around 43. But there's just a reminder that no matter how long we plan to put a trip together and operate for 10 days or 2 weeks, there's always going to be a demand. I've been on these other trips that you see here. They're still in the top 20 or 30. There's just always a demand, especially for these U.S. territories in rare locations like Baker and Wake and Johnston and Curie and so forth. Now, this is our last little video that I'm going to show you. One of the guys on the team is a gifted quadcopter operator. His name is Mike Snow, and basically he took this and spliced this together and then sent it to us. I took the audio track off, but what you're going to see is him actually walking from Lulu Bay, and there he is there with his controller, all the way up the path that I came down before, so you can get an idea of the the vegetation and the scenery and so forth. If you guys want to ask any questions, open your microphone. This is going to go for a couple minutes and it'll end up at the lighthouse, but there's no audio on this track. So if you want to ask any questions, please do.
How are the bugs?
The bugs weren't too bad. Spiders were a little bit troublesome there. But we came well prepared to handle anything crawling around or flying around. We were forewarned, and the two docs that came had plenty of medical supplies in case anybody got into trouble.
John, I
Yep.
have a question.
Yep.
You were talking about donations. I'd like to know what the end cost was of the trip and then the end total on contributions for the trip.
The best person to ask is Bob Alfin, because he ran the numbers. I know we ran at about 400,000, but I didn't keep track of the QSL, the money that came in from OQRS, so I don't really know what these all are designed to pretty much break even, or if there's something left over, it goes in a pot for the expedition. But we knew up front, because we were told up front what we were going to need to spend for Fish and Wildlife to go for the helicopter, as well as all the other things that we needed to do as far as equipment. So we're no surprises, but I think we did okay, and none of us got any money back. We didn't expect to, the operators don't. But if there's a little bit left over, if anything, some of the foundations would get some money back, or for the larger donors, but usually they don't even want them back. And basically foundations would say, we'll just put it in the kitty for the next trip.
All righty then. Thank you, John. I was just curious.
Yeah.
At least make sure it was break even. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. See this, Mike is a really talented drone operator. He's covering this pretty well. I think he actually takes us right into inside the Stepper 2 element antennas, kind of at the end of this. And by the way, those Stepper 2 element antennas are fantastic. I think the boom is 5 feet, but they're really good antenna, lightweight. They make a great home antenna. You don't need, they're not heavy. You can put them on, if you mast them, put it on a decent mast and guy them. You don't really need a tower. But there it is. He's flying right inside the 2 element. It's a great antenna. And we had 4 of those, and they worked really well. And again, you can see what the terrain looks like around there from some of his aerial photography here.
Did you bring back all the antennas?
Yes, we did not give those away. Yes.
And what other steppers did you use, or what other antennas again did you use besides the steppers?
We had a 6-meter Yagi that you can see. That's right in the center of the photo there, and the rest were all wire antennas dropped off the lighthouse.
Were they in-fed or dipoles?
They were mostly dipoles. I think that's the end of and that's Mike standing there. That's where this ended. So yeah, I'll stop sharing. Thank you for letting me run overtime too. I've lost track of the time a little bit here.
Oh, that's not a problem, John. We really appreciate you giving the presentation. Let me turn my video back on here.
I thought it was wonderful.
And the thing is we'll probably get you back for the other talk that we talked about in email here in a couple months, sometime later.
Yeah, I haven't. You haven't been to Palmyra yet.
Yeah, it's true. Which one was just eliminated and put it on the deleted list out west in the Pacific? Was it Baker?
No, that was let me think.
Clipperton?
That was no, it was I'm drawing a blank.
Kingman Reef?
It was Kingman Reef.
Okay.
If that's the one. It's underwater.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I guess that pretty much dumps all over BS7H then too, because if Kingman's underwater, then Scarborough Reef is really got to be submerged.
Well, it's different part of the world, but so I mean, the Scarborough Reef is a bunch of rocks, and I think the big problem there is China and the Philippines are both at war over who really controls that part of the world, and of course, there's a lot of other things going on in the China Sea right now. So that's going to be a long way off. I don't know that underwater is the problem. It's the politics around that. That's the big problem.
Oh yeah, it's like Spratley. So
yeah, when we flew from, if we do Palmyra together, on our way there, we flew over Kingman Reef because it's on the way, basically. So I do have a shot out the window and show you what it looks like. And then shortly after we did that, that's when it was removed from the DXCC list.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody got any?
Just a quick question. Is the island due north or where is it from the northern coast of Jamaica?
It's due east, directly east. It sits right between Jamaica and Haiti.
And the name again?
Navassa, Navassa.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, I'm curious. We had a late member join. Who is Galaxy Note 20 Ultra 5G? I'm trying to take a head count for the newsletter.
That sounds like somebody from another planet.
Yeah. Well, we get them here in Kansas City, John. You don't have the corner of them out in California. I spent a year in San Diego, and it's a toss-up between here and Cali.
Yeah, it is a toss-up. There's a lot of our share of strangeness out here too.
That's true. All right, guys. Well, I think that's about it. We had a head count of 30, and John, I really appreciate it. And like I said, we'll talk, and maybe we probably won't get back in here before Dayton. Maybe we'll meet up at Dayton, and then we'll schedule getting Palmyra going and give a talk on that later on in the year. Okay.
Happy to help. Happy to help.
No problem. We appreciate it.
Thank you for everything you do.
Okay, guys, I'm going to leave the room open, probably let Lee in charge. I'm going to send out the email to the Reflector about the AB0X panel where you can get your own call so we can get a head count. Where's Josh? I got Josh's email already. I think he bolted out N0EG. So he's already on the list, and we'll get some more going, and I'll notify Bruna, and hopefully we can get some made up before Dayton. But that's about the extent of it, folks. I'll see you guys later. I just got to, while John was doing that, I got an update from my boss. I got to do an update on the Chinese radio. So I will leave Mr. Lee in charge, and I will catch you all later.
Question, when are we going back to the
Thanks,
library?
Chuck.
Larry, we're gonna try and have live meetings next month in Overland Park.
Okay.
Now, that's one thing I'm glad everybody, I wanted to see, if anybody has an idea, the library is great, but we need to find something that's going to allow us to have possibly a later meeting than 8 o'clock. The library cuts us off at 8. So that way we can start the meeting later, like 7 o'clock instead of 5:30 or 6 or 6:30, whatever. That way it give everybody time to get home from work, kiss the dog, kick the wife, and head out the door. So if we can find a place that's going to allow us to have a later meeting that would be centrally located, maybe along the I-35 corridor or something like that, that has Zoom capabilities, by all means, pass it on. We'll check it out. So, but yes, next month we're planning on a live meeting at this time.
Hey, Chuck,
Yes.
I'll get with you. I missed the part on the engraved items, so I'll get with you on the phone about that because I was out.
All right. Sounds good, Craig. I can talk to you about it.
Thank you.
All righty, guys. I'm going to let you guys have at it, and we will talk to you later on. And the recording will be up on the web, on the Groups.io, hopefully the next day or two.